It was a grim and silent evening inside the office room. The atmosphere was hushed, and no one remained there except for two individuals. Dahoon was engaged in a cardio training session with team manager Lee So-hee. She appeared confused and uneasy, expressing concern that they shouldn't be doing such a thing in the office. However, the training was already underway, and the irony of the situation was heavy. He had ended up training with not just a colleague but the team manager, who, as fate would have it, turned out to be the mother of the very girl who had once destroyed his life. The moment had finally arrived. It was time for revenge. Rewinding to a month prior, Dahoon had been seated at his desk in the office, immersed in work, when a sudden message notification popped up. It was from team leader Lee So-hee. He had wondered why she would be messaging him and what reason she might have to summon him. As of the previous day, Suk Dahoon had completed 1 full year working at the company. He had thought to himself how inconvenient it was that the team leader's office was so far away. Reflecting on his past, he remembered how he had dropped out of high school due to severe social anxiety. Yet, he had overcome it and managed to pass the GED exam. Eventually, he had graduated from a nationally recognized university, even though he had joined later than most of his peers. Despite the delay, he had secured employment, which in itself felt like a personal triumph. On his way to the team leader's office, it struck him just how unbelievable it was that an entire year had already passed since he had started working there. Now, having reached her office, he stood before the door, thinking that if anyone were to ask him whether anything extraordinary had happened in his life, despite living a fast-paced and routine schedule, he would most certainly say it involved the team leader. After knocking, he heard her voice from inside, inviting him to come in. Entering the office, he found her seated comfortably and appearing to be in a particularly pleasant mood. Politely, he asked her if she had called for him. Lee So-hee, the team leader, was known as an extraordinary individual who had achieved success at a young age. She was widely respected across the company for her admirable qualities and impressive skills. She excelled in nearly every aspect of her work. Observing Dahoon lost in thought, she interrupted him with a teasing remark, questioning why he was daydreaming. Then, noticing something, she commented on the scent of alcohol lingering around him and asked if he had been drinking with his colleagues the previous night. Embarrassed, he admitted that she was correct. Laughing, she acknowledged her accurate guess. Dahoon, however, couldn't help but notice how her actions often contradicted her words. Despite her authoritative tone, her beautiful and mature demeanor gave off a different impression. She went on to mention that she had called him in partly to congratulate him on completing 1 year at the company, just as he had celebrated with his team. She explained that she wanted to collaborate with him on a new project and that manager Tame had recommended him for it. She said she looked forward to working with him. Casually, she placed a small bottle of alcohol in his pocket and told him to drink it to sober up, saying she would be waiting in meeting room B. Looking down at the bottle, he nodded respectfully and assured her he would do his best. The day dragged on, filled with exhausting tasks. Later that night, she asked him how he had found their first meeting together. He replied that he had mostly just sat quietly and listened to the others. She told him that it was understandable, considering it had been his first time in such a meeting. Then she informed him that starting the next day, they wouldn't be able to avoid night shifts anymore. Surprised, he asked for confirmation, and silently, he thought about how the two of them working night shifts together didn't sound so bad. In fact, every man in the company, himself included, harbored a secret wish to work nights with the alluring team leader. But for now, it remained just a dream. The elevator arrived, and both of them stepped inside. As the doors opened again, she asked if he was heading straight home. He confirmed he was, then inquired whether she was heading to the station. Internally, he reflected on how no one had ever dared flirt with the team leader. After all, she was a company executive, and a married woman at that. She explained that she wasn't going home just yet because her daughter had come to pick her up, wishing him a safe journey home. He responded with similar words, thanking her and saying goodbye. As he walked away, he found himself deep in thought. Despite her being a married woman, he couldn't help but feel drawn to her. She was incredibly attractive, but the risks were far too great. To him, she resembled a forbidden fruit hanging precariously from the edge of a cliff. And yet, despite knowing better, he had wanted to have dinner with her. While lost in those thoughts, a young woman passed by him. He glanced at her, wondering if she was a visitor. She stood there looking awkward, and he found himself wondering if she might be the team leader's daughter. Moving closer, he addressed her gently, telling her she seemed lost. But as she turned around to face him, his entire body stiffened in shock. It was Han Somi. He couldn't believe it. Staring at her in disbelief, A rush of terrible memories flooded back. She was the very same bully from his high school days, the one who had harassed him relentlessly. She had been the reason he had dropped out of school and had developed the social anxiety that still plagued him. He recalled a particularly humiliating incident in which she had poured milk on the floor and ordered him to lick it. Snapping back to the present, rage welled up inside him. Just then, Lee So-hee walked over to the young woman and asked affectionately whether she had been waiting long. The girl, her daughter, responded with mild irritation, questioning why her mother had taken so long. She hugged her tightly. Lee So-hee explained that she had thought her daughter was waiting in the parking lot and asked if she hadn't mentioned having plans that day. Han So-mi replied that she had canceled those plans to have dinner with her mother, insisting that her mother was more important. Hidden behind a nearby wall, Da-hoon observed the interaction with wide eyes, stunned beyond words. The truth crashed down on him in waves. Han So-mi, the person who had ruined his youth, was Lee So-hee's daughter. Da-hoon stood frozen in place, his thoughts a chaotic whirlwind. He kept telling himself that he had moved on, that he had buried the pain of the past deep within and had let go of everything related to her. But now, faced with her unexpected return, everything resurfaced. Why, of all times, did she have to appear in front of him again? The name he had worked so hard to forget came rushing back. Han So-mi. His heart trembled in fury. The overwhelming emotions boiled into a single word that echoed inside his head. Revenge. Yes, revenge was what he needed. That was the only way to ease the storm inside him. He clenched his fists, shaking slightly, and forced himself to think clearly. If she had caused him to lose something precious, he would repay the favor in kind. She needed to lose something, no, someone equally valuable. That was the only way to balance the scales. His gaze turned cold as he thought that the person most important to her must be her mother. The following evening, team leader Lee So-hee was working late during her night shift in the office. She sighed quietly to herself, trying to muster some energy. She muttered that she couldn't afford to feel tired already, especially not when the shift had just started. She reminisced briefly about her younger days, back when she didn't even need supplements to keep going. Youth truly was a gift, she mused. A small smile tugged at her lips as she wondered how Da-hoon was doing at that moment. Just then, Da-hoon entered her office, carrying a calm and polite expression. He approached her and mentioned that he was planning to make some coffee, and asked if she would like a cup as well. Gratefully, she agreed and told him that sounded wonderful. He made his way into the office kitchen and began preparing the coffee, casually asking her preference, hot or cold, or whether she would like some ice added. She responded that she'd like it iced. As he busied himself with preparing the drinks, his mind was far from peaceful. Behind his calm expression, there was a different resolve brewing. Handing her the cup, he asked with a teasing smile whether she wasn't staring at him a little too much. Then, in a quiet and reflective inner voice, he acknowledged what he was about to do. He had already decided to throw himself off the metaphorical cliff, to dive headfirst into the madness of his plan. And although he knew it was reckless, even foolish, he had finally found a reason to go through with it. Lee So-hee responded playfully, saying that she had simply been wondering about something. She pointed out that he seemed to be working out quite a lot lately. Perhaps it was because he was still young, but his muscles looked particularly well-toned. Then, tilting her head with mild curiosity, she asked aloud whether they were hard. Her words sent a chill of strange excitement down his spine. This, he thought, was his reason, the justification for everything. He looked at her and offered with a soft grin that if she wanted, she could touch them. After all, they were alone in the office and he didn't mind. But beneath his polite demeanor and flirtatious tone, his mind remained sharp and calculating. This was all part of the plan. He wasn't just flirting for the sake of attraction. He was preparing a stage. He was going to gaslight Han So-mi's mother, to pull her into an emotional snare. This would be his way of making Han So-mi pay for what she had done to him. He told himself that he would make sure to deliver the best present So-mi had ever received, and it would come in the form of her mother's heartbreak. Lee So-hee had looked at him with a hint of confusion when he had made that bold comment about letting her touch his muscles. She asked what he meant by that and told him to stop messing around. Smiling awkwardly, she excused herself and then slowly reached out. Her fingers brushed his arm, and she gasped softly. His muscle felt solid beneath her touch, his veins visible beneath the skin, and his body was unusually warm. For a moment, she let her hand linger. In the back of her mind, she wondered how long it had been since she last touched a man's body, even in such a small way. But the thought startled her and realization struck hard. Dahoon, still holding his calm demeanor, asked her with a playful grin if it felt good. She replied with a half-teasing remark, suggesting he must be popular with women. He chuckled and mentioned that he had spent a lot of time working out during a long period at home, decided it was best to redirect the moment. He suggested they get back to work. But just as they were about to move, her hand jerked and she accidentally spilled coffee onto his shirt. He looked down, noting the spreading stain and how soaked the fabric had become. She gasped in surprise and quickly offered him her handkerchief, apologizing sincerely and asking if he was okay. Without hesitation, she stepped forward and began wiping his shirt, gently blotting the fabric. She assured him she would take care of it. Dahoon remained silent as he watched her. Behind his composed face, his mind was sharp and calculating. He wasn't just thinking about the coffee. He was watching her reaction, her proximity, the gentle way she tried to clean up after the accident. To him, this was only a piece of the larger puzzle. In his heart, he had already made up his mind. She would become the reason he would walk straight off the cliff, into revenge, into chaos, into something irreversible. Elsewhere in the city, Hansomi was behind the counter at the cafe, working as the manager. She passed coffee to a pair of male customers, smiling brightly. The young men, clearly smitten, whispered to one another about how beautiful she looked. Her cheerful smile and effortless charm had long been the talk of regulars. As she handed over the drinks, she encouraged them to enjoy. The two boys continued whispering, saying she had always been popular, especially when she smiled like that. But just then, Dahoon stepped forward, appearing out of nowhere. His expression was serious, and without hesitation, he told her that she owed him an apology. She looked up, taken aback, and asked why she should be the one to apologize. According to her, it had been his fault for being such an easy target back then. Her tone was casual, dismissive, as if she didn't even remember what she had done. Dahoon stood in place, his breath caught in his chest, boiling inside. How could she act as if nothing had happened? As if the years of torment she had caused didn't matter? Inwardly, his anger screamed. She was living a normal life, untouched, unbothered, like she hadn't pushed him to the edge. He thought bitterly about the countless nights he'd spent in darkness, fighting back the urge to end it all. The emotional wounds still hadn't healed. For years, he had tried to forget her, and now here she was again, smiling in public, surrounded by admiration, while he carried scars from her cruelty. It wasn't fair, and in his heart he blamed her entirely. Later that evening, back in the office, the night shift had begun. It was the final day of the project. Dahoon sat in silence, staring at the dim lighting, his thoughts drifting to darker intentions. He told himself that this was the night he would act. After all the waiting, after the preparation, this was his chance. The project was nearly over, and soon there would be no further excuse to see her every day. He glanced at Lee So-hee across the room and thought about how they had worked closely over the past week. In a sudden motion, he flipped the switch on the wall and turned off the lights. The office went dark. Casually, he announced that the lights must have gone out. But his intentions were far from innocent. He looked over at the cupboard and pointed, telling her that the printouts might be over there. Inside, he was already weighing the risk. Was he truly willing to gamble everything for a chance at revenge? He moved closer to her, thinking back over the week they'd spent together. One thing had become obvious to him. The team leader, for all her strength and poise, was unexpectedly vulnerable to physical closeness from men. He began closing the distance between them. So he stepped back slightly, clearly uncomfortable, and told him he was standing too close. But Dahoon ignored the warning. With firm resolve, he addressed her, saying that before he could train her properly, he first had to make her his. She froze, completely stunned, asking what he meant. His tone didn't waver as he replied that he couldn't go back now. Confused and alarmed, she asked him again what he was doing. He told her that he had waited a long time for this moment. He insisted that she had waited too, that every time they had touched while working, she had secretly expected more. She quickly denied it, telling him he was mistaken. Still, he reached out and gently touched her hand. When she flinched, he used that reaction to prove his point. He noted that even a slight touch could make her react so visibly. She scolded him, telling him to stop joking around. But he continued. He told her that he would help her understand, not just the satisfaction of being a career woman, but the joys of being someone who embraced emotional and physical connection. She was growing visibly upset now. Her voice sharpened as she told him it wasn't right to conduct any kind of workout session in the office, especially not like that. Her eyes narrowed in disapproval, and she made it clear that the boundaries he was trying to cross were unacceptable. He had also mentioned that he needed to train her in wrestling so that she could experience what he referred to as the real pleasure of being a woman. After making that remark, he burst into laughter, clearly amused by his own comment. He then went on to say that she was right about something she had said earlier, though he didn't specify what. He added that he had noticed her constantly looking away during their interactions, implying that she had been trying to hide something. He told her that he had found it strange how she had been paying such special attention to him, as if something more were going on beneath the surface. She was visibly confused and asked him what on earth he was talking about. Her tone suggested that she wasn't just surprised, but genuinely disturbed by his words. In response, he claimed that he understood the situation well and that it was unfortunate, for him at least. Given her position as team leader, her age, and her strikingly attractive body, he confessed that he couldn't help feeling excited every time they worked out together. There was something about her that stirred up feelings he said he couldn't control. Then, as if acting on impulse, he gently touched her. Her body stiffened as she processed the sensation. Internally, she found herself feeling unusually strange. She told herself that she should absolutely detest this moment. After all, it was Dahoon who was touching her. But instead of revulsion, her body was reacting in a way she couldn't explain. She finally gathered her composure and told him firmly to stop, emphasizing that what he was doing was incredibly risky and inappropriate. Despite her discomfort, she turned and walked a few steps away from him, trying to regain control of the situation. She said aloud that there was no way he could have feelings for her. No way at all. She needed to leave immediately, declaring that she would go first. She told him he should clean up and leave afterward. She made her way toward the door, but before she could reach it, he asked her if she was really going to leave like that. He then walked over and shut the door, telling her bluntly that he hadn't said she could leave yet. They still had unfinished office work to complete. Inside, his thoughts were jumbled, his head a complete mess. He didn't seem to know exactly what he was doing, yet he pressed on. She turned back toward him and told him to stop joking around with her. But he insisted that he was serious. He said he had known it all along, that he had been holding back his feelings for a long time, trying not to let them show. She looked at him again and asked, more insistently this time, what he was talking about. His response was unsettling. He said that he had felt this way before, and that even though she was a bit clumsy as a team leader, it was okay to be honest about one's feelings. Otherwise, it would make no sense for someone with such a stunning body to act as though she were completely unaware of the effect she had on others. He added that her defenseless demeanor only intensified that impression. She told him it had to stop, that he had taken it too far. But he ignored the warning. He said that in many ways, it was her fault that he had been exposed to such tempting views on a regular basis. She looked at him, alarmed, and asked again what he was talking about. Then, trying to defuse the moment, she told him to just go home and take care of whatever personal issues he had. She reminded him that he still had tasks to finish and should complete his work. He brushed off her suggestion, saying that it was okay. But then he asked what she meant by go home. He was thinking to himself that, at this point, he had done it. He had succeeded in trapping her in this awkward and charged moment. He changed the subject and asked her why she was staring so intently at the protein bar on the desk. He reminded her that she had previously said she didn't want it. She challenged his assumption, asking who had told him she was doing that. Without waiting for a clear answer, he grabbed her hand and told her there was no need to act that way. It was okay to touch him if she wanted to. As all of this played out, he was silently reflecting that the revenge he had been planning was beginning to consume him. It felt like it was going to burn him alive. Then, breaking the silence, he addressed her as team leader. When she asked what he meant by that, he reassured her again, telling her that everything was okay. But in his thoughts, he was justifying it all, saying to himself that since she was his colleague, and they were supposed to train together, the workout session was something he needed to go through with at least once. She responded by clarifying that they would only do the cardio session one time, and then they would both go home. He agreed, saying, of course. Though in his mind he had already decided that there was no going back. He didn't care anymore. He had always wanted to go through this workout session with her, and now it was finally happening, calling her team leader again. He wanted to know whether she was enjoying herself. When she responded that she wasn't sure, he told her that he could make her feel even better. With that, he began teaching her more techniques, guiding her movements with increasing confidence. She protested, asking what he was doing and pointing out how embarrassing it was to be doing something like this in an office setting. But he continued calmly, still teaching her the exercises, and at one point asked why she was so cute. Meanwhile, his thoughts drifted to CornhwaSama, and he concluded to himself that everything had started because of her. He promised himself that his revenge wasn't over. Not yet. The moment would come. He would wait. He began to recall a particular day when the team leader had been praising all the colleagues in the office. She had been smiling warmly and expressing her appreciation, saying that everyone had done a great job that quarter. She noted that the planning team had once again been the best performer and thanked everyone sincerely for their continued hard work. 2 team members were standing in front of her at the time. One of them had told manager Lee So-hee that she was always right and that they were all indebted to her. The other added that their achievements wouldn't have been possible without her leadership. Meanwhile, another girl who had been standing beside Daehoon at the time had been quietly observing. She had thought to herself that So-hee, who smiled more than anyone and was loved by everyone, was truly an ideal boss. She admired how So-hee managed her work so efficiently, all while being graceful and beautiful. She wasn't someone anyone could dismiss or take lightly. Later, So-hee had walked over to Daehoon and addressed him directly. She had reminded him that it would soon be a full year since he had joined the company, encouraging him to continue working hard in the future. She thanked him in advance for his dedication, then gently pointed out that his necktie had come a bit loose. In that moment, Daehoon had been filled with admiration, thinking to himself that manager Lee So-hee was the most respected person in the entire company. He had also started imagining himself doing a cardio session with her. He had expected it to be good, but the experience was proving to be even more incredible than he had imagined. As the session continued, he had been fully focused on guiding her, giving instructions as he went. At one point, he had told her to lift her head up and keep her posture straight, calling her manager with a teasing tone. In his mind, he couldn't help but feel that the situation was more interesting than he had anticipated. Perhaps she might even be enjoying it. He kept complimenting her, almost excessively. He asked if it was really possible that she was a married woman with a child, remarking that she looked far too beautiful for that to be true. He added that her husband must be incredibly lucky, but she quickly cut him off, telling him not to bring up her husband or her child during the session. He responded casually, saying it was fine, but she interrupted him again, insisting they take a break. He agreed, telling her that she would get used to it soon enough. He also noted that she seemed to have become more sensitive to the workout than she had been before. Then, without warning, he gently kissed her. He looked at her and asked why she was so cute, still caught in his own thoughts. Internally, he was already planning that he would be the one to train her personally during their workout sessions from now on. In his mind, he was thinking that this was a huge success for him, that he had accomplished something he had never expected. He was basking in the moment, convinced that no one else could replace what he had just experienced. But suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. He noticed someone entering the office unexpectedly. It was the night security guard holding a flashlight in his hand. The guard's voice echoed in the dark, asking what kind of sound had been coming from that area. He mentioned that the lights were off and called out to see if anyone was still inside the office. The night shift was taking its toll on the guard, who moved through the dimly lit office, exhausted and muttering to himself that working part-time as a guard was more difficult than he had imagined. He wondered if this was the last room he needed to check. Just as he was about to leave, he suddenly noticed a faint noise coming from the far corner of the office. He froze, startled, and questioned inwardly what that sound could have been. Hesitant but alert, he moved cautiously toward the meeting room. Standing at the entrance, he debated whether he should go inside, asking aloud if anyone was there. As he stood in the silence, unsure of his next move, his phone began to ring, snapping him out of his thoughts. He murmured that a call was coming in and quickly answered. Meanwhile, inside the office, hidden in the shadows, Daehoon and Lee So-hee remained crouched in silence. So-hee whispered, asking if he still wasn't done yet, her voice tight with anxiety. Her instincts told her someone was still nearby. She quietly stated that someone was definitely outside and that if they came in, they'd be caught for sure. Outside, the guard, still distracted by the call, responded to the voice on the other end. They had asked how things were going, and he replied by asking if there was any issue on their side. Then, he added that he was just checking the building and suspected someone might still be inside. Unsure, he asked what he should do next. As the guard's flashlight passed through the hallway, its beam triggered a chain of memories in Daehoon's mind. His thoughts drifted involuntarily to his painful school days, days haunted by the bullying he endured from Lee So-hee. One vivid memory surfaced. He had been sitting quietly in his classroom when CornhwaSama had suddenly approached him. Back then, he had gone by the name Lee Sungmin. Han So-mi had leaned toward him and, with a falsely sweet voice, had told him she missed him. Shocked and terrified to see her, he had asked what she was doing there. She had been hiding a piece of paper behind her back and asked playfully if he hadn't received a love letter. Confused, he had questioned what letter she meant. She then claimed that the letter was from him. With a cruel smile, she told him she had been waiting for him ever since she noticed the way he had restlessly stared at her. Without warning, she had grabbed him by the collar and accused him of being a criminal trying to hurt a delicate woman. Then, laughing coldly, she mentioned something about a 10,001 prank. Before he could even respond, she shoved him violently to the floor and broke into loud laughter, calling out to the rest of the class. She had shouted that she had told everyone Lee Sung-min would fall for the trick, mocking him and calling him a loser who had fallen for a fake confession. That moment had stayed with Daehoon like a scar etched into his soul. He had remembered thinking that she was the one who had made him feel so hopeless, the one who had driven him to the edge of suicide. Even now, the pain echoed in his heart. He recalled how she and her group had locked him inside a classroom, laughing as they did it. They had joked about leaving him there until he starved. At the time, he had convinced himself that the nightmare was finally over, that the trauma had faded, but clearly, it hadn't. Snapping back to the present, the voice on the other end of the phone instructed the guard to return quickly after his rotation, as someone else would be covering the night shift. The guard assured them he'd be back soon, then exited the office with a grumble, muttering that he truly hated this job. Once the coast was clear, Daehoon and So-hee emerged from hiding, gasping quietly as they caught their breath. So-hee, still tense, remarked that they had survived the scare. But Daehoon wasn't fully present. His thoughts lingered on his earlier flashback. He questioned whether he had just seriously considered giving up. So-hee, still shaken, confessed that she no longer wanted to continue playing this twisted game. Daehoon admitted he had also thought about quitting just moments ago. But now, something had changed inside him. So he looked at him, confused and unsure. Meanwhile, Daehoon silently resolved that no matter what happened, he would have his revenge. He reminded himself that she, Lee So-hee, was Han So-mi's mother. The same So-mi who had made his life a living hell. There was no way he was letting it go now. Both of them agreed to move forward with the next session of the game. However, the requirements would be a little different this time. Daehoon held up a mirror and instructed her on how to look into it. So he gasped when she saw her reflection, exclaiming that her face was completely flushed and looked terribly red. Embarrassed, she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Daehoon commented that it felt strangely nice. As the intensity of the moment grew, So-hee's mind began to feel numb. Daehoon, however, was still deep in thought, struggling with his emotions. He knew that if things continued in this direction, he might become someone unrecognizable, even to himself. She had been pleading with him continuously to end the exercise, her voice filled with confusion and frustration as she kept asking what exactly he was trying to accomplish. Yet, he replied nonchalantly, almost teasingly, saying that it looked like she enjoyed doing workout sessions in silent, secluded places. He added that he was simply trying to finish it quickly, just as she had asked him to speed things up earlier. Despite her clear attempts to stop him, he went on with the session without hesitation, fully focused and undeterred. Inwardly, he was reeling. The situation felt surreal to him, almost too strange to be real. He kept thinking that the manager who was admired, even idolized, by all the employees was now doing an intense cardio session alone with him in a private, quiet space. The realization was making him feel dizzy. His thoughts raced as he struggled to contain his excitement. Things were progressing faster than he had ever planned, and his strategy was working out better than he could have imagined. On the other side of the city, Han So-mi had been trying again and again to call her mother, her fingers moving restlessly across her phone screen. Anxiety slowly crept in as her calls went unanswered. She couldn't help but wonder what was happening. Was her mother working late again? She had sent several messages too, asking if her mom had finished work, questioning what was taking so long. But there had been no response. The silence made her increasingly uneasy, a quiet tension settling in her chest. As her own shift neared its end, she came to a decision. It seemed she would have to go pick her mother up herself so they could return home together. Before she could leave, however, one of her co-workers approached her with a casual smile and asked if she had a moment to help clean up the store. The colleague even suggested they grab a late-night snack while cleaning. But So-mi politely declined without hesitation, explaining that she had something she needed to take care of after her shift. With that, she left the cafe without looking back. While walking through the quiet streets, her mind drifted again. A part of her couldn't help but feel irritated with herself. She was constantly worrying over the smallest, most meaningless things. Everything seemed so insignificant in hindsight. She had once imagined that growing up would bring clarity and excitement, that adulthood would be different, better. But the truth had turned out to be far from her expectations. Life as a grown woman now felt far more monotonous and emotionally dull than her carefree days as a student. As she stood waiting at a streetlight, she pulled out her phone and stared at a photo of herself and her mother. One of their happier moments. The image stirred something soft inside her. She sighed and thought that her life was supposed to be peaceful by now. Wasn't it? Quietly, she dialed her mother's number again. Her voice was gentle this time as she left a message, asking if her mother was still working and telling her how much she missed her. Her thoughts grew reflective. Everyone, she mused, had their own unique definition of happiness. Some chased wealth, others success. But for her, happiness was something much simpler. Living a quiet, ordinary life with her mother. That was her version of happiness. That was all she had ever wanted. She reached the building and entered the elevator, pressing the button for the 16th floor. As she ascended, her mind whispered a quiet wish, to leave peacefully, without any more complications, without getting caught in messes that didn't concern her. Let's just live a calm life, she told herself silently, without being pulled into unnecessary chaos. The elevator dinged, signaling its arrival. The doors slid open slowly, and there, standing directly in front of her, was her mother, So-hee. Her breath caught for a moment. Her eyes flickered toward her mother's hand. It looked odd, perhaps tense, and then shifted to the man standing beside her. It was Dahoon. So-mi looked at her mother with a questioning expression and immediately asked whether she was finished with work. Then, more sharply, she asked what had happened to her hand, and who the man beside her was. Dahoon turned toward So-hee and, with slight surprise, asked if this girl was her daughter. Then he turned to So-mi directly. His tone was calm and polite as he told her that he had heard quite a bit about her and had been looking forward to meeting her someday. As he looked into her eyes, something inside him stirred. It had been so long since they had seen each other face to face like this. He hadn't expected this meeting, hadn't even thought it possible anymore. But now, as fate would have it, here they were. He stared at her quietly for a moment, then thought to himself that, despite everything that had happened, it was truly a strange pleasure to meet Han So-mi once again. So he had glanced at her mother with a skeptical expression, her voice laced with disbelief as she asked whether the tall young man in front of them was the same loser her mother had mentioned in the past. The one who, according to her, had done nothing but grow taller. In response, Han So-mi had studied the young man carefully before nodding. She had affirmed with certainty that he was indeed from their class, though she appeared slightly taken aback herself. She questioned aloud what was going on with him and then repeated, almost as if to convince herself, that there was no mistaking it. He had to be Lee Sung-min from those earlier days. So he, unable to suppress her curiosity, had asked her mother what he was doing here. But Han So-mi had appeared hesitant, caught in a brief moment of uncertainty. She muttered that it had to be him. There was no way she was wrong, but still questioned whether she could trust her own recognition. Determined to resolve her doubts, she moved forward slightly and called out to him, asking if he was really Lee Sung-min. But the young man didn't stop. Without making eye contact, he simply passed by the two women and said, "Excuse me, I'll be heading in first," before walking toward the exit. As he reached the door, he paused for a moment and spoke over his shoulder, correcting them with composure. He told them his name was Suk Dahoon, not Lee Sung-min, and asked that they please remember that for the next time. Although he didn't turn to look at them directly, his eyes briefly flicked in Han So-mi's direction, and a quiet fire seemed to flicker behind them. In his thoughts, a firm promise formed. He would come after her soon. There was a resolve in him that refused to be ignored. The following day, So-hee sat alone in her office, her thoughts tangled in a mix of embarrassment, confusion, and regret. Her fingers nervously tapped against her desk, and her gaze remained fixed on the empty space in front of her. The memory of what had happened still clung to her like a shadow. She kept replaying the events in her mind, convinced that she must have gone mad. Regardless of how good the atmosphere had initially been, it had all been swept away by one reckless moment. While she continued to overanalyze everything, the door opened without warning, and Dahoon stepped inside, his tone bright and casual as he greeted her with a polite, "Good morning, madam." She glanced up, managing to respond with a quiet, "Good morning, Dahoon." Though her voice lacked warmth, he observed her pale complexion for a moment before stepping closer. Internally, he admitted to himself that his visit wasn't just for official matters. He had come to see how she was holding up after what had happened. When she asked what he needed this time, he replied that he had come to deliver a report. But inwardly, his mind was drawn to the strange thrill he felt just being near her. It was unfamiliar, yet oddly exciting. After a beat, he leaned forward slightly and remarked that she didn't look well, teasing that a grown woman like her should know better than to neglect her own health. Without waiting for her response, he stepped behind her and gently began massaging her shoulders. Startled, so he stiffened under his touch. She looked uneasy, her body betraying her hesitation. Still, she didn't stop him right away. He commented on how tense her muscles were, claiming she needed to relax. She quickly responded that it wasn't necessary and tried to wave him off. Yet despite her protests, a quiet storm was stirring inside her. She couldn't understand it. Every time he touched her, something strange spread through her body. It wasn't exactly fear, but it wasn't comfort either. It made her skin feel too warm, her thoughts too scattered. Dahoon, picking up on her shallow breathing, asked again if she was okay. He reminded her that she had reacted the same way previously and, with a teasing grin, suggested they do another gaming session like before. Her eyes widened, and she quickly told him to stop. But he continued pushing playfully, commenting that it seemed like her body was already responding. She shook her head, flustered, and insisted that it wasn't like that. Just then, the door opened again, and another employee entered the room. She stopped mid-sentence as she took in the scene, her manager seated, visibly tense, with Dahoon standing far too close behind her. She asked awkwardly if Sohee was busy with Mr. Dahoon. Snapping back into her professional demeanor, Sohee addressed the employee swiftly, asking if she had come for certain documents. When the employee nodded, Sohee assured her she would handle them and politely asked her to leave. The woman nodded again, this time more hesitantly, and exited the room without saying another word. As the door closed, Sohee turned sharply toward Dahoon, whispering with urgency that they had almost been caught. She asked him if he had completely lost his senses and demanded to know what exactly he thought he was doing. She warned that this was dangerous, both professionally and personally. Dahoon, however, only smiled slightly and asked if she had any plans after work. He proposed that they go out for drinks. Beneath his casual tone was a more calculated intention. He thought to himself that he couldn't afford to let her distance herself from him. That was why he had made the suggestion. He needed her to stay close to keep her within reach. That evening, the marketing team gathered at a lively bar, laughter and chatter echoing through the room. Sohee raised her glass in a toast and cheered with a smile. To Marketing Team 1, everyone clinked their glasses together, enjoying the moment. Dahoon sat a short distance away, quietly watching her. He couldn't help but feel annoyed. This wasn't what he had envisioned for the evening. His mind drifted back to earlier when Sohee had announced to the entire team that it had been a while since their last team dinner and suggested they all go out together. He had never imagined she would turn their private invitation into a group event. Leaning closer, he reminded her that he hadn't meant it to be a team dinner. She asked him what was wrong with that, feigning innocence. He realized then that perhaps he had underestimated her cautious nature. When he confessed that he had wanted the evening to be just for the two of them, she had chuckled and replied that drinking together alone would only get her into trouble. He glanced around the bar, realizing that she had made a calculated move. She had purposely brought others along to avoid being alone with him. It was smart, clever, even. He thought to himself that anything beyond friendly conversation in public would be risky now. It was clear she had become more alert to his intentions. Seated beside her, he accidentally brushed against her hand. He quickly apologized, saying he hadn't meant to do that. She looked at him and said it was fine. It wasn't like he had grabbed her or done anything inappropriate. It was just a touch. She asked if it hadn't been on purpose. Her calm, collected reaction left him confused. Something about the way she handled it made him feel like he had lost the upper hand. Then, in an effort to break the tension, he suggested they step outside for some fresh air. She agreed, and the two of them quietly slipped out of the crowded bar. As they stood in the night air, surrounded by quiet streets and flickering neon signs, Dahoon felt a surge of relief. Finally, they were alone. He turned to her and asked how she was feeling, subtly hinting at the idea that this moment, just the two of them, might have been what she truly wanted. But Sohee didn't smile. She looked hesitant, conflicted, and then told him in a firm but quiet voice that they shouldn't be involved in this way. She explained that things could become far too complicated if they crossed that line. Dahoon listened but refused to back away. In his mind, things were already complicated, and he believed she wouldn't be able to escape that reality. Her resistance only fueled his determination. Smirking slightly, he leaned in just enough and suggested a wager. If she won, he promised to never touch her again, never bring up workouts or games, and to keep his distance. But the glint in his eyes told another story, one that hinted he had no intention of losing.